Hello, I'm Helena Clayton, and alongside my work in organisational and leadership development as a coach and as a facilitator, I've had a long-standing interest in love and the role that it could and arguably should play in organisations. So in this series of conversations, I'm going to be talking to some people who share that interest, some from the corporate world, but not all by any means. We have an Everest explorer and an academic for you to hear from. And together we'll be talking about what difference more love might make in organisations. What do we mean by love in a secular, in a workplace sense? What blocks and enables love to flow? And perhaps more importantly, or most importantly, what are acts of leadership that are acts of loving leadership? So there'll be some more details about where to find more information at the end of this session. I hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you on the other side. So today I'm talking to Caron Bradshaw OBE for Services to Charity. And Caron is the Chief Exec of the Charities Finance Group, a membership body for charities, helping the not-for-profit sector really drive their impact by making sure they understand all things financial and the impact of all things financial on their charitable organisation. And I met Caron a couple of years ago now when I was running a workshop on leadership and love for the ODNE, the OD Network Europe organisation, in partnership with John Lewis. And Caron was a participant on that workshop. And I was so struck by not only was he somebody who had been thinking about love and leadership for longer than I had, but he was somebody who was actually leading from love. So Caron really knocked my socks off. And as I'm sure she'll go on to say, she's writing about leadership and love at the same time. So Caron, it is so good to be talking with you today.
Thank you. And you.
And as we were talking earlier, one of the things that it's quite unusual to do is have a conversation with anybody about leadership and love. So my first starter, I suppose, is what is it about who you are that means you are wholly comfortable having that kind of conversation?
So the thing I would say is I haven't been comfortable with this for a long time. It's only been in the last maybe 3 years that I've felt really comfortable talking about love in this context. Up to that point, I had that sort of, the moment when you put your hand on a fire guard and you withdraw. Every time I sidled up to something that was more than just being nice or kind or thoughtful, I would pull away. And I had almost a breakthrough moment of a new mentor who was absolutely fabulous, Britta Fernandes-Schmidt, who's the Chief Executive of Women for Women International. Awesome woman. And I started a mentoring relationship with her, thinking going into it that I'd probably done everything I could do in my current role, that I'd used all the tools in my toolkit, so I couldn't affect the change that I wanted to, and that my purpose in talking to her was to try and find out and work out what I did with my career next. And she just completely stopped me in my tracks and made me look in a very different way. Firstly, she sent me a wonderful cartoon after we'd spoken. Do you know the Charlie Mackenzie, the boy, the fox, the horse, the mole series? And she sent me this fantastic picture that said, "What is success?" the boy asked. "To love," said the horse. And I put it on my wall at work, and I thought, why she sent me that, and why has that resonated so much with me? And the next few conversations and sessions we had, she invited me to stop thinking about that sort of self-limiting context of, I've used all my tools in my toolkit, maybe it's time for me to move on and pass the baton, and all those sorts of words, and invited me to think about my purpose. And we were about to go on a sort of family holiday of a lifetime, and I took this book that she'd suggested that I read by Gabriella Bernstein. And it really is about the universe has your back, and it's thinking about purpose. And while I was away on this holiday of a lifetime reading this book, just had this moment of recognition that that's what I felt my purpose was, to bring love into the workplace, don't know why or where it had come from, but it just struck me that was what I needed to pursue. And I found it deeply scary and very, oh, crumbs, everybody's going to rubbish me and think I'm this la-la-y person that's sort of floating around talking about love, and what on earth are you talking about? But the more I thought about it and the more that I thought about my purpose, the more I became absolutely convinced that's what I needed to do. And that would be the thing that helped me fulfill my purpose and help me help the people that I was working with and leading. So it's a very strange and almost very recent thing. 2018, I think it was, that I sort of came to that conclusion.
So I really hear that, the kind of, oh, blimey, now I have to start talking about love in order. Did you start using the word, and what did it take for you to do that? And did you, I guess, get the reactions you feared you might?
So I did start doing it, and we were going through a cultural shift at work, and one of the tools that we used was something called the management shift. And the lady that was running the process with us, she took me to one side one day and asked me why I wasn't committed to the program. And I thought, oh, crumbs, what do you mean? Of course I'm committed. I'm the one that brought you in. This is ridiculous. But the challenge that she gave to me made me realise that I was holding back. I wasn't leaning into this word and this purpose and wholly committing to it. And so, yes, I had committed at this sort of superficial level, and I'd started to talk about love, and but there was still a part of me that was going, oh, crumbs, people are going to judge me. I can't do this. And so it's been an effort that I've had to keep doing. But just like sort of training a muscle, the more that I do it, the more comfortable I become with it. And the response that I've had from particularly my staff, and actually in the job adverts. So I've talked about love in articles. I've talked about love in job adverts. The more that I've done it, the more that I've said it, the more people have responded in a really positive way to it. And not everyone feels comfortable with it, but they feel comfortable with me being comfortable with it, if that makes sense. So those who are still saying, are at that level that says, oh, you just mean being nice and kind and gentle. I don't mean being nice and kind and gentle, actually. And actually, sometimes love is incredibly not gentle. It's incredibly tough and abrasive and tricky. But there is that willingness to engage with the concepts and willingness to engage with the culture that is creating a safe space, because that's what, for me, love is. It's about creating that safety to be able to have those really tricky conversations in a way that I don't think you do if you don't have that safety net of that human loving connection. If that makes sense.
Yes, it does. And I wonder, could you build on that? Because the question that often comes up is, what do we mean by love? What does it look like in practice? And there is often the assumption that it's all about care and softness and nurture. And of course it is that. But you're saying, actually, it's so much more than that.
There's a wonderful phrase from applied improvisation that is yes and. And so when you talk about kindness and compassion and nurturing, yes, it is that, and it is more. I had a fantastic chairman called Ian Theodorson. He was the finance CFO at the Church Commissioners, and he was my chairman. And I had a nervous breakdown at work. That in old money, that's what you'd call it. I burnt myself out. I spent a considerable period of time off work, didn't honestly think I'd be able to get back from it, and felt incredibly dark. But Ian was there the whole way through it and was so loving and so wonderful to me, and held that space for me to return to in ways that were just mind-blowing. You know, this is a man I really love him. I think he's a wonderful individual, human being, but he's never let me get away with things He's always challenged and held me to account, but I've never felt like I was being caught out. I'd never felt like I was unsafe. And the reason why he comes to mind when you ask that question is that I think that I had this living demonstration of what leading from love was about. And he's a deeply Christian man. When I told him that I was writing about this and that I was exploring this sort of notion of loving leadership, he drew my attention to the Bible's reference of love. And obviously you don't have to be somebody of faith to think about this, but I think this is fantastic, and I'll read it to you, because I think if you to swap out the word love for leadership, it will illustrate why I think this is a really important one. Love is patient and kind. So there's your kindness and compassion. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices with truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. And I think that's what I'm talking about. It's the not being arrogant. It's the being able to absorb the criticism, but give away the credit. It's about being positive and loving, even if you're dealing with somebody who's underperforming or is being horrible or unpleasant to other people. It's holding a space that is consistent and compassionate and understanding. It's about giving ground. It's about listening to understand and not listening to reply or to build yourself up. It's a very giving state of being. It's an active thing. It's not a word. It's an action. It's a state of being. And so for me, that is way bigger than just being kind and being compassionate or understanding. It's all of those things. And I think it enables you to be able to, from a personal perspective, equip yourself to deal with the really difficult feedback that you sometimes get in a way that accepts that sometimes some of that will be unfair, and to be able to understand what your reaction is to it in a way that enables you to take the diamonds from the dirt and be able to not rubbish the feedback because it's come from or is imbued with unfair elements, but actually to find the bits that are positive and truthful and require you to do something differently. Because let's face it, people who are hurt will hurt you. And therefore, often what you get is all of the good stuff that you need to listen to and pay attention, but packaged up in a way that is so deeply personal or deeply unhelpful or deeply hurtful that you don't listen to the stuff that you should listen to, kind of suppress it or rubbish it or move on, or you become defensive and you tool up. So yeah, I think it's much more than kindness.
I'm really getting that sense, and I'm in the biblical definition. The phrase "all things" comes up a lot. Endures all things, accept all things, and that's sort of what you're saying. It means that we accept the diamonds, but we also fully accept, equally accept the dirt, which is accepting everything, which I often call radical acceptance, which takes quite a lot, right? Yeah, so you really are painting a picture of the how much more there is than kindness and compassion. Also, sometimes.
Sorry.
No, go ahead, Caron.
I don't think that it makes the uncomfortable comfortable. It's not sort of a magic bullet. But what it does is it gives you the strength to hold a space, to be able to look at and process information that would otherwise be really difficult to process.
And with more of that, with that deeply safe space being held, what do you see as being possible that maybe isn't so much now in organisations?
So I think we only touch the surface of people, and when I think you create a space which is safe, which does enable people to share the deep and dark bits of themselves, because we wholeheartedly believe we're one person, and whilst we might kid ourselves that we can bring a version of ourselves here and a version of ourselves there, when you mask up and create this sort of image of yourself, the mask will slip, or you become unauthentic, and people see through you and they don't trust you because what they see doesn't feel like it's fully you. Whereas I think that if you can create a space that is imbued with love in that way, so that people can bring their authentic selves to work, and I'm not talking about no boundaries. I'm not talking about there being appropriate and inappropriate behaviours and we just throw it all out and everybody can be who they are. What I mean is closing the space between who you are in the different roles that you play with the appropriate boundaries, rather than this sort of tooled up mask that we put on because we're serving other people's expectations of who we are. And for me, the first step in leading with love was loving myself and accepting myself fully, and not kind of rubbishing bits of myself and telling my ego to go away. It was about recognizing that each part of me was wonderfully imperfect, but was also part of me and made me who I was. And therefore, which bits could I lean into and amplify, and which bits did I feel I needed to not necessarily tone down, but listen to in a different way, almost witness my emotions in a different way. So I think that's probably at the heart of it for me, is that sort of getting people to bring their whole selves to work with appropriate boundaries, and to be able to really engage with and push through things that would otherwise in other environments make them run away. Because I think that we too often give up before we've really dug deeper. There's many layers to ourselves. And if you go back to where I started with Britta, my beginning part was saying, I've used all the tools in my toolkit. What rubbish! What a self-limiting thing to say, but we all do it. And if I feel that I can achieve more by loving myself and opening those layers up, then that's what I believe this can bring out in our workplaces. It can bring out the better sides of people and enable them to really play to their strengths and to work collegiately with each other. I don't mean that everyone wants to go on holiday with everyone and everyone gets on wonderfully. It doesn't remove those abrasive tensions or the variety of different personalities. Not everyone is going to be, quotes, loving everybody else, but the environment of love enables, I think, those differences to be celebrated and amplified and used in a way that produces better outcomes.
So there's something in there that a safe space of love allows abrasive tension to be just dealt with and moved through and processed, and for it to be allowed and accepted and healthy in organisations, but held.
Yeah, I can give you a really good example, actually, a live example. Through this process of the pandemic, we've had to put some of our staff on furlough. And actually every one of our staff is currently doing flexible furlough, me included. And when it was first brought in, there were very clear restrictions about using flexible. We had to do it very quickly, introduce it for a very small number of people. And it may have felt to many people within the organisation that it was rushed through. There wasn't a lot of consultation. And as the months have passed and we've been able to use furlough more, that growing sense for some people that it hasn't been handled properly, or it hasn't been handled in the way that they would like it to, was fed back. Now, from my side of the table, I've taken a pay cut. We're trying to save staff. We're working ourselves, over the hours that we should work. And then to have feedback to say you haven't done this well enough could enable you to just go, like the KPMG man, well, you should be grateful you've got a job. But love enables you to say, ouch, now let me sit back and think through this. And now let me see it from their perspective. And now let me see, how do I work through that in a way that is healthy and appropriate for all of us.
Lovely. Really lovely. That's a great example. And I'm struck too by what you're saying here. You said it at the beginning. It was your commitment to the word love that made it possible for you to use the word love. And equally, I've just heard you say something similar. You can enable people to bring all of themselves to work only when you have accepted all of yourself. So it seems like there's a consistent theme here about actually leading from love starts with me. I have to do some work myself, so that,
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't think that you can, and in fact, you use the word leading from love, whereas I had started by saying leading with love. I don't think you can lead with love unless you can lead from love. I don't, unless you love yourself. And I'm not saying that I think I'm perfect, or that I sort of preen in front of the mirror and say I love myself, but I'm really super comfortable with myself. I know my flaws. I'm very aware. But I'm also incredibly receptive to other people helping shape me going forward, because I think that I'm a better leader today than I was yesterday, and I would hope that I'm a better leader tomorrow than I am today. And it's that sort of sense of forward motion in acceptance that I'm a flawed human being. Everyone's flawed. I'm not claiming that I'm perfect, but I absolutely am committed to trying to be the best version of myself and to helping other people be the best versions of themselves.
And if we think of organisations, it's been said that organisations are loveless places. We can debate that, not least because if human beings are hardwired for love, and there's lots of research that says we are, then how can organisations be loveless if they're made up of human beings? But nevertheless, I can understand the reason people say that. What do you think gets in the way in our organisational systems? Why isn't love more present? Why is it almost a taboo word to use? Why is it so tricky and problematic?
I don't think there's a single reason. I think there's a multiplicity of reasons. I think part of it is about the nature of the workplace post-war. We were very much in the command control, just get things done. We've moved into this 9-to-5 productivity mindset that is very mechanical, and the way that we talk about the workplace is often in sporting terms or war terms, or rather than in nature terms. And therefore, for me, I think the biggest barrier to being able to have a loving work environment is this fact that we mechanize it. We make it into this sort of structural, formal thing that disincentivizes people from being vulnerable and opening themselves, because it does require a great deal of vulnerability. It really hurts to look at yourself at times. You really do recognize that you are a deeply flawed person at times. And that's very difficult to both accept that you're flawed and love yourself in the same breath, because it means you have to recognize and accept those things about you that you perhaps don't like very much.
Right.
So I think in the workplace, we're very hung up on this notion of getting stuff out the door, productivity, do stuff. And rather perversely, it's the thing that I think drives down our productivity, because you've just said human beings, they ache for connection and love. But if we're trying to turn them into machines, or to make them play a role in a sporting, wheeling the cog, all of these sorts of mechanistic, rather than part of a rich ecosystem that enables them to thrive in the bits that they're good at, but not to have to thrive in the bits that they're not good at. Why would you force somebody to focus on the things they can't do when you can amplify the things they can do? That's not to say that you allow poor performance, but that you recognize that people are, and workplaces should be, rich ecosystems where there is far less sort of boxes and much more bleeding between the different lines, so that people can flex and wane and support each other. So I think that's probably one of the big barriers, is that sort of post-war productivity mindset.
Yeah.
I think there's also a great deal of fear And I think fear snuffs out generosity. Fear of failure, fear of getting things wrong. When we talk about holding people to account, often we're not really talking about holding them to account. What we're talking about is blame. We're talking about shaming, naming, pushing people. That's the problem. But I don't know about you. I don't think I've ever made a mistake where I set out to do that. I didn't wake up and go, how can I royally screw up everything today? You just don't. And therefore, the people that often make mistakes are the ones that are most acutely aware of it and feel the worst for it. So that permission to fail and that permission to explore, I think, is also another barrier, that if it's not present, you can't have love, because you're not allowing somebody to accept their fault, to do that looking in the mirror and saying, I've got something wrong and how do I move through it? You're immediately just putting that roadblock in and saying, you can't be wrong. If you're wrong, you get penalised, as opposed to, we'll do this together. We'll work through this together. I'm not saying you shouldn't discipline people for gross misconduct or making ridiculously significant mistakes. This is not about everybody's great in the garden, it's all lovely and fluffy, but it is about having conversations in a respectful and supportive way, and not beating somebody up and making them feel less than because they've got something wrong.
Yeah, I really get that. And where do we begin, do you think? Where might a leader begin to counteract some of that? Where do we start? Where can we plant seeds? How do we amplify what's there? Where does a leader begin to cultivate more love in a workplace?
So I think you have to start with yourself. There's a lot of stuff you can learn and some practices. And I said at the beginning, it's about work like a muscle, like exercising, getting used to it, getting comfortable, like walking a pair of shoes in. It feels tight and uncomfortable to begin with, but the more that you do it, the easier it becomes. And I don't think anybody seeking to make a cultural change can do that unless they actually are 100% committed to it themselves. To go back to the lady Talita who did the management shift with us, her insightful questioning of me and challenging of me, why are you holding back from this, when I hadn't noticed it myself? Probably had actually, but I'd suppressed that thought. I hadn't completely and wholly committed to it. That was not going. I was destined for failure if I hadn't accepted that. And so therefore I think it is about that commitment to and knowledge of and love of oneself before you can then bring that into a workplace. And I don't think everyone is as blessed as I was at having a chairman who absolutely showed me love in an appropriate, in a professional setting. Somebody joked, oh, you shouldn't love your chairman. But absolutely, I felt I should, and I did, and that started me on that process of recognizing that these are not mutually exclusive things. Love and work can absolutely go together, and should, in my view, go together.
And so the word ecosystem comes back. Actually, it's like you sound like at various times you've had around you an ecosystem of people who were willing to use the word, who were willing to nudge you in that direction, to hold up a mirror here, to love you fiercely there. So you've had an ecosystem of standing stones, of supporters who've really helped you step towards that.
Yeah, I think I very much believe in the word serendipity. I think things pop up at the time. Meeting you at the time I met you, all of these different elements. When I started the first restructure within the organisation that led me to burnout, actually, I asked for some support from my chair and my board because I'd not taken an organisation through a piece of such radical change. And that change management process, I felt I needed some support. And I took on an executive coach through word of mouth, had no idea whether or not this person would be the right person for me, but absolutely clicked with him. And in a similar way that Sam, that I described from Britta, Sam did the same sort of thing. He didn't answer the question I went in asking. He had this ability to, like the layers of an onion, peel me back and get me to look at myself. And I recognized that some of the things that I worked through with him in my coaching sessions in order to empower me to deal with change then massively equipped me after everything went terribly wrong and the proverbial hit the fan. It wasn't until I was after the other side of that, looking back, that I could recognize that the coaching that I'd been exposed to and the journey I'd gone on about self-discovery enabled me to move through that experience in a way that turned a breakdown into a breakthrough. If you paid me £1 million, I would not give up the experience.
Yeah.
I wouldn't wish it on anybody. There were moments where I felt suicidal and I really didn't think that I would get through, which again was a very weird experience because I thought suicidal thoughts were very dramatic, etc. I didn't think they were rationally reading your pension provisions to see if they would pay out to your family if you committed suicide. And then I realized, oh, crumbs, what am I thinking and what am I doing? But looking back on the other side of that, I recognized the things that Sam had worked through with me on a personal level as an executive coach had equipped me to be able to put those negative experiences into a really positive place to enable me to understand and see from the perspective of the people that had caused me great harm during that period of time what was happening to them and why they felt, why they deserved my compassion and love as opposed to my anger and vitriol. And never sought retribution against the individuals that caused me harm because I don't believe they meant to cause me harm. They were wrestling with their own demons. And that's enabled me, I think, to see the positive in every negative that I encounter. I might not see it in the moment. We're all in the grip of things.
Right.
But I can work through them much more rapidly than I used to. And the distance between that hurt and that ability to relax into it and see the truth and the way through is much more rapid than it ever was before.
Lovely. This combination of having some great people arrive at the right time, but also your openness to go with it, to take the learning, to explore what was there. Fabulous combination.
Definitely have to have a growth mindset. Anyone that is fixed in mindset, there is no point. You can't pretend at this stuff. You have to strap yourself in and go on the roller coaster. And once you're on it, there is no way back. Once you've switched this stuff on, it's incredibly difficult to then reverse back out of it.
No way back. Tell me a bit about your book, Caron. Maybe, what's the essence of it? What are some of the key points that you really want to get across in it?
So I did quite a few presentations and things, and people sidled up to me and said, why don't you say more about this? Why don't you write this down? And I had thought, crumbs, why would anyone want to read about me? But Britta was again part of the journey of thinking, well, actually, maybe it's good, it's useful. It's if I can write this down, it will help me shape my own thoughts, but also other people might find something useful in it. And it doesn't have to be a leadership tome. It can just be a story. It can just be me sharing my experiences. So it is so far, and it has ground a little bit to a halt as a result of COVID, but it is so far about me sharing my experiences and trying to help people understand their own experience in that context. So I know that many of the things that happened to me through my childhood shaped who I am as an adult. Some of them were good, some of them were bad. I was incredibly lucky with my parents. They were, still are. I mean, I've lost my dad, but my mum is incredibly socially aware, incredibly loving. What we didn't get in terms of money and privilege we got in love, and that context enabled me to be very socially minded. My parents turned vegetarian before I was born, so I've never eaten meat. All of these things are the values that I felt held with. And for example, in one of the bits that I've written down, I say we might not have had central heating in the house until the late 80s, but the house was always warm. It was always full of love. It always felt wonderfully warm. It wasn't perfect, but it was great. So in what I do through writing this down is process the information. I'm trying to share, what's this bit here? What does it mean to me? What have I learned? And how does that then translate to your own circumstance? And is there anything useful in it? So that's where it is at the moment. I do share some of the things that I've encountered and found really useful, like applied improvisation. I think it's a fantastic thing. I don't think we laugh enough. I don't think we play enough. And so it explores some of those. It talks a bit about my breakdown, because I think it's helpful and healthy for people to understand that mental health shouldn't be a taboo, and that if we don't look after ourselves and we try to push through, our bodies will say, nope, I'm going to stop you there. But that can also be a really positive experience. The Japanese art of kintsugi, I think I referenced it in that blog that I linked you to the other day. That shattering, that breaking of things, when it's carefully and lovingly repaired, can produce something much more beautiful, much more that improves on the raw materials. And that's how I feel about every negative experience that I've worked through. That if I look at it and examine it with curiosity and openness, and then try to repair the damage in a way that it builds on, that can give me something that is better than what started.
Fabulous. I for one, am definitely looking forward to reading that.
I've just got to finish it now.
Write it now, for sure. Yes. Yeah. And I love that idea too of making sense of who we are today and how we lead today through where we began and how we grew up and what shaped and informed us along the way. So yeah, that sounds fascinating and fabulous. Yeah. So as we close then, Caron, what would you like to say as the kind of final word, really, if you think of linking leadership and love in organisations? What would you like us to close with today?
So I think that when we are in a position of leadership, and that doesn't come with title, so I think people need to challenge what they think leadership is. All of the interactions that we have with other people can lead, whether it is as a parent, as a friend, as a spouse, or in our workplaces. If we can change and challenge the constructs that we have been shaped and bombarded with throughout our years, and use that privilege and love and that space to surrender power to other people, to open the ceiling and not draw up the ladder behind us, but actually help people go up the ladder, come back down and help the next person up. Then I think that a lot of the sticky wicky problems that we face, whether it's in the workplace, in private sector, public sector, charities, would be that much easier to solve. And it would enable us to give a bit more space to listen to other people's ideas and to truly understand other people. If you look at things like Brexit or the current situation that we're in, there is so much divisiveness. And I do genuinely believe it's because we don't love each other enough and we don't give space to understand each other enough. And if we could do that just a bit more, then I think we would work through and find some solutions that can't keep everybody pleased all the time, but certainly we would tone down some of this divisive, hurtful negative and destructive stuff that we're all experiencing.
Yes to that. And if you hadn't ever written that down to go in your book, when you get the recording, just put that in your book. Yes to that. I love that, especially just our willingness to surrender power and let go of what we hold on to so tightly. That is love. Caron, thank you so much.
I've loved it. Thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. And we first met on Twitter, right? So we met via Twitter and then we met in person. So I love that we're keeping this digital connection as well. Great. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
So I hope you found something of interest there and things to stimulate your thinking. For more information, head over to my website, helenaclayton.co.uk. There you'll find the show notes from this conversation, plus links to my blog page, a way to sign up to my newsletter, my Leading from Love program, and a lot more. And drop me a line, find me on LinkedIn or Twitter, of course. It would be great to connect with you that way too. Okay, bye for now.